Popularity comes in fads, but some of the most popular toys known worldwide weren't initially meant for children. You won't believe what fidget spinners were actually supposed to be used as. New to this channel? Don't forget to give the video a big thumbs up and subscribe for more. Here are 10 toys that weren't supposed to be for kids. Play-Doh. Did you ever play with Play-Doh when you were younger? We know you did. They were a staple in almost every kindergarten or preschool around the world. When you look at it, it seems like its only use is as something for school children to play with. But that isn't exactly what it started out as. Let's take it way back to the 1930s. Noah McVicker created the putty substance by using flour, water, salt, boric acid, and a few other ingredients. But he used it as a wallpaper cleaner. His company in Cincinnati sold the substance and marketed it as a cleaner that would not harm your wallpaper. Eventually, teachers began to notice that the non-toxic substance was great for arts and crafts projects. Once Joseph McVicker joined the company, he decided they should take advantage of the fact that their product was being used in schools and market it with a new name. Thus, Play-Doh was born. They soon began selling the product to schools and department stores. It was almost an immediate success. The family later started the Rainbow Crafts Company in 1956, which created and sold Play-Doh. The company struck gold when the Macy's in New York and Marshall Fields in Chicago began selling the putty. In the first year, the company reached almost $3 million in sales and is now a staple for kids everywhere. Silly Putty. Does anyone know of a productive use for Silly Putty? It may not be the most advanced toy, but it sure is fun to play with. Because it is so widely played with by children, you may think that the slippery substance has always been marketed as a toy, but it was actually created as something totally different. During World War II, engineer James Wright was trying to create a substitute for synthetic rubber. The U.S. War Production Board needed a less expensive version, and they decided Wright was the man for the job. While working in a General Electric lab in Connecticut, Wright dropped some boric acid into a silicone oil. What he got was a substance that turned out to be far more stretchy than rubber. His employers determined that his mixture wasn't any better than what they already had, and they passed on purchasing it. Later, a businessman named Peter Hodgson decided that if they remarketed the putty as a fun toy and called it Silly Putty, they would open it up to a whole new market. To add to its appeal, they released the toy in tiny, brightly colored plastic eggs during the Easter season. A fun fact about this toy is that astronauts on the Apollo 8 moon mission actually used it to help keep their tools secure in zero gravity. Pretty nifty for a child's plaything, don't you think? Frisbees. Who doesn't love a good pie? There's no better way to finish off a summer picnic. But once the pie is finished, what do you do with the tin? Well, back in the day, people used to throw them in competitions. In 1871, Civil War vet William Russell Frisbee started his own pie company and named it the Frisbee Pie Company. His pie-making business became extremely successful and sold almost 80,000 pies per day, which was a lot back in 1956. Frisbee may have predicted his success, but what he couldn't have expected was the other way that people would use his pie dishes. The pans stamped with Frisbee pies could soon be seen flying all around the Northeast. Kids were playing with them and throwing them back and forth. The pies were also quite popular at Yale University. After a while, the students could be seen all around campus throwing the dishes around. They used to call it frisbeeing, and it was one of the students' favorite ways to pass time. Walter Morrison then came along and created a toy called the Whirl-O-Way that would mimic the pie tins. Unfortunately, he didn't succeed in selling his product because of his lack of marketing skills. The Wham-O company, who also invented the hula hoop, then bought the rights from Morrison to the toy. The Wham-O experts decided to study the students at Yale and heard them yelling frisbee when they would throw the pans. The company changed the spelling of the word to avoid any copyright issues, and the modern-day frisbee was born. Silly string. When you think of children's toys, none of them probably stick out as something that should be used in the medical field. But that is exactly where silly string actually got its start. In the 1970s, inventor Leonard A. Fish and Robert P. Cox got together to solve a medical dilemma. They set out to try to find a substance that could create an instant cast for broken bones. Ideally, the substance that they created would be sprayed onto the wound and be an instant sealant. The two tested several prototypes, but nothing seemed to really work. During their testing, they tried out hundreds of different nozzles to spray their invention. During this testing, Fish found a nozzle that would allow the product to shoot out like string up to 30 feet away. Realizing that they weren't on the way to any significant medical discoveries, Fish and Cox decided to repackage their invention as a toy. They went back to the drawing board and changed their formula to make the string way brighter and less sticky. Because they didn't know how to market, they had a meeting with the major toy company, Wham-O. Unfortunately, after spraying the string on the person they met from the office at Wham-O, they were asked to leave the office. The next day, they received a telegram asking for testers of the product from one of the owners of the toy company. And from there, the rest is history. Slinky. It seems like some of America's best toys were created by accident. We guess we should be thanking whatever strange forces came together to yield such amazing playtime objects. Take the Slinky for instance. Without a strange turn of fate, the toy that we all know and love would simply be a boring old spring. Though the toy's slogan may read that a spring is a marvelous thing, normal springs have nothing on the Slinky. The Slinky was created by Richard James in 1943. James had been working as a mechanical engineer and was actually trying to produce a new set of springs that would help keep fragile equipment steady no matter where it was, especially on a ship. One day, James accidentally knocked one of the springs over. Instead of just falling to the ground like he had expected, the spring appeared to walk down to the ground. James instantly knew that he was onto something, so he used a machine that could coil 80 feet of wire into a 2-inch spiral and decided to market it as a novelty. His wife Betty came up with its popular name. When they first put it on the market, no one really wanted to buy it, but during the Christmas season of 1945, Philadelphia department store Gimbel's let James demonstrate how to use the Slinky to customers. Within minutes, James sold around 400 Slinkies. Rubik's Cubes. Rubik's Cubes have become somewhat of a staple to measure genius in both children and adults alike. To some, they may seem impossible, but they are sold in toy stores all over the world, which means someone must be solving them. Rubik's Cubes actually weren't originally created to stretch the minds of kids. Actually, in 1974, a Hungarian architect named Ernő Rubik designed the cube to use as a puzzle to help his design students learn the fundamental rules of 3D geometry. Once he created the cube, it actually took Rubik over a month to solve it himself. Rubik believed that the object was for art purposes and was merely a sculpture that symbolized the contrast of the human condition. But as fate would have it, a popular toy brand took interest in his invention. Later, Rubik decided that his cube might do well when marketed to the public and signed a contract with Toy Corporation in 1979. Since then, over 300 million cubes have been sold. There are some people that are currently able to solve the Rubik's Cube in under a minute. Others have never been able to complete it. The popular toy has also been featured in several movies, including The Pursuit of Happiness, starring Will Smith. Slap bracelets. Have you ever heard of slap bracelets? The fad quickly caught on and children could be heard slapping the jewelry on their arms daily. Some schools ended up banning the bracelets because they had been seen as a safety hazard. But before slap bracelets landed themselves on schools' do not wear lists, were they even intended to be toys? No. The answer is that they weren't. The toy started out as a steel experiment by Stuart Anders. He was a shop teacher in Wisconsin and created what he called a slap wrap, which was a piece of metal covered in fabric that could wrap around the wrist of anyone that slapped it around their arm. Later, Eugene Murtha, who was the president of Main Street Toy Company, got the idea to distribute them, and they finally caught on. They sold at least 1 million bracelets within the first month and millions more in the next few months. Because they were so affordable, they became a huge hit in the United States in the 90s. Other than being used as a toy, these bracelets are also sometimes used to secure pants around cyclers' legs, and reflective slap bracelets have been used by pedestrians at night to attract attention. What are some of your favorite uses for slap bracelets? Etch-a-Sketch. Love to draw? Well, we can bet that some of your first drawings were probably on an Etch-a-Sketch. If you don't know what it is, it's a toy that allows you to draw simply by turning little knobs at the bottom of a screen. When you're done with your drawing, all you have to do is shake the screen and it will completely erase everything you had done before. Sounds like the perfect toy, right? Well, the earliest Etch-a-Sketch was just a translucent decal on a light switch plate. Andre Casagna was an electrician in the 1950s. He was installing a factory light switch when he peeled off its decal and made some pencil marks on it. He then realized that he could see the image that he drew on it on the opposite side of the decal. From there, the Etch-a-Sketch that we know was born. He tried out several different materials to create the perfect toy before deciding on glass and aluminum powder. The early versions of the toy worked on a pulley system inside the box that allowed the knobs to brush the aluminum powder around the screen. There have only been slight modifications to this toy since then. Meccano. This is one of the oldest toys on the list. In fact, we wouldn't fault you if you don't remember it or have never even heard of it. In the early 1900s, English store clerk Frank Hornby routinely built mechanical models for his children to explain mechanical concepts. While doing this, he was annoyed that each model needed a new set of parts, which made it more difficult for him to build. This gave him the inspiration to build a system that could be interchangeable. He then invented the Meccano system, which contained strips, brackets, axles, and wheels. He called it Mechanics Made Easy, and initially wanted to sell it to educate children on the basics of mechanical engineering. It wasn't until later that he realized that what he had actually created was a very popular toy. Because of its interchangeability and the fact that you could build almost anything, it was like the very first iteration of Legos. Hornby came up with the name for the toy by creating a mixture of the words make and know. The toy did so well that he had to quit his job and focus on producing it full time. The toy can still be found in toy stores today. Fidget spinners. By now, you may have heard of the infamous fidget spinners. The toys have been taking the world by storm, and it's hard to find a kid without one in their hands nowadays. Well, these toys actually weren't meant for fun. While visiting her sister in Israel, the inventor, Catherine Hettinger, heard about how kids had been throwing rocks at police officers. She wanted to create something that would distract the children and give them something soothing to focus on. She first came up with a soft version of a rock, but quickly changed that idea. Once she returned home to Orlando, Florida, she began working on the early versions of what we all now know to be fidget spinners. Hettinger first came up with the toy over 20 years ago, and now it is finally widely successful. She said that it started as a way to promote peace, but she ended up finding something extremely soothing. Unfortunately, the toy only became popular in recent years, which means that her patent, which expired in 2005, is now null and void, and companies can create the toy without her. She isn't upset about it, though. She says that maybe if her only goal had been to make money, then she would have been upset. But she's actually thrilled that her idea has caught on like it has. That's it for 10 toys that weren't supposed to be for kids. Were you surprised about what some of these toys were actually meant to do? Tell us what you thought in the comment section down below. And as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye!